Hi folks, welcome to How It Works with Holger and another special episode for web development. Today I'm going to show you how you can make your tables or data tables responsive, because by default tables in HTML will not work well when you change the screen size. Especially on mobile devices, tables are cumbersome, and especially if scrolling is involved, that's not nice. So today you will learn how you can build responsive data tables. Without just talking about it, this is what we'll be building. This is a table, and the data in here is something that should be in a table. You shouldn't be using a grid or a flexbox. This should be a table, because that's what tables have been designed for. You have a caption, you have a header, and then you have different rows. The rows have an alternating background color. That is something that we'll do as well. This table shows baseball teams of the AL East, and those are the current standings today on May 10th. I just copied it from the Major League Baseball page. However, this is just dummy data. In a later part of this video, you'll learn how to dynamically read this data from a web service and generate this table with these kind of things. I will not be as detailed how to generate the actual table, because we had that in another video, so the details will be given in the other video, but still this will be very, very detailed so that you will be able to generate a table like this. But the main part comes now. So if you switch into the development mode on your web browser, make sure that you activate here this tiny little icon, which switches between the responsive mode. This is the normal mode, and this is the responsive mode, and you can even pick different devices here. So this is the view with 1300 pixels width, and if here we can resize, and you see the width is getting smaller, 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 smaller. Now it gets resized a little bit. Okay, because that's okay, but as soon as we would get overlap, or the New York Yankees would drop into a second line and would give a horrible appearance to the table, what happens is we get stacked view of all the different columns. So now, instead of having a horizontal alignment, we have a vertical alignment of the data. So each row in the table becomes its own square, so to speak. So we repeat for each one the column identifier, so team, wins, losses, and all that kind of stuff. If we scroll down, each of the items is now stacked. And the amazing thing is that this kind of thing does not require a single line of code in TMS Web Core. This is something you can get just using CSS with HTML. And I will make the HTML and the CSS available on GitHub, of course, so you can incorporate this into your own products. And because it's CSS, if you build your tables a certain way, this will work right away out of the box. That's the beauty of CSS, so to speak. You just have to keep a certain format for your HTML, and then the CSS will be applied to that HTML, and it will have this behavior. I'll also show you how you can do different colors for the numbers, and these kind of things are all orchestrated by the CSS and not so much by the HTML. If I show you the HTML of this thing, which I can do by right-clicking and say View Page Source, you see that we have a very, very simple, let me make that bigger, source that only has a table with a caption, a header, in the header is a row. Then we have all the different row items, right? And then we have the body with the different records of information. But there's nothing specific about the styling. There's not a single thing like colors or alternating colors, what we as Delphi developers would expect, right? Nothing is in here. The only thing that's in here is the raw data. And the CSS now will use these kind of tags like the table tag, the caption tag, the rows, and style those that the look and feel will be exactly like you've seen it here. And also, we will insert a breakpoint at around 990 pixels that we flip between the horizontal view and the stacked view. And that is actually quite ingenious how that works in HTML nowadays, because you have different ways to align things. In previous videos, I've talked about flex boxes and grid, and this is actually making use of all of that depending how wide your table is. But before going into all those details, let's just look at it and build it from scratch. As always, I have my usual setup. I have a folder. In that folder, you find my index.html, which contains my HTML, and it links to a style sheet defined in style.css. Here's my style.css file. And in there, I just have a few basic definitions. And all these have been explained in detail in previous videos of how it works with Holger that dealt with CSS and HTML development. So I'm not going to go into deep detail how that all works. I just imported the Inter Google font and also set the border box sizing model. It's not really that important for this particular part or tutorial. I just included it because I always include that, because I want my boxes to be calculated including the border size. And then with regards to root, the root element, I define my variables. That's possible in CSS nowadays. In modern CSS, we can define variables. They don't have to start with with double dashes, but that's common, so to speak. So this is my variable for the background color. This is my variable for the text color. And what I picked is a dark scheme. So we will develop the web page in a dark scheme. Obviously, if you wanted to do a light scheme, you would just change these colors and everything would flip over. Later, we will add more colors, but those are the ones that we work with for now. The whole table is wrapped in a div, which gives me a padding of 4 rem. And again, the measurements, previous video, I explained those. That means that we go 4 times of the root element font size, which is 16 pixels by default if you didn't change anything. So this means 4 times 16. So we have that as a padding. And on the top, not on the left and right. Left and right is 0. And then the width of this container here, or the wrapper, is minimum 900 pixels or 100% minus 3 rem. Think about it. That means that the table will never be wider than 900 pixels. That's the minimum. 900 will trigger that minimum clause. But if it is smaller than 900, you take 100% of that and subtract 3 rems to still make the table appear in the middle. And the margin inline auto gives us margins on the left and the right automatically, meaning the content is being centered. Then for the body, we set the font family to Inter, no margins, no padding, and we set the background color and the color using the variables. So here, this background color that refers to up here. So this CSS is built in a way that you can just change the variables up top and you don't have to go into the code where this gets reused. Okay, that's the reason for variables. Variables are much more powerful in CSS than you might think at first. They're also not called variables officially. That's kind of strange because you refer to them as with var, but officially they're called custom properties. So if you want to learn more, Google custom properties in CSS. That's where you get all the nitty-gritty details about variables or custom properties in CSS. On the right, we see the current preview of our page. And not only a preview, this is actually the web page, what it looks like right now. And that's what we'll deal with first. So we just defined a table inside of the wrapper, and the table has a caption. The caption has to be inside of the table tag, and then we can start with the header and with the body. By the way, these are not really needed, but with regards to accessibility, it's always better to have them. This is something I want to preface this video with. Accessibility features like text-to-speech and these kind of things are not really featured here. You might be required to have some so-called area attributes in here so that some of the text is being spoken, some of the text is not spoken. That is a whole different ballgame with HTML and CSS nowadays. I'm not going to go into that in detail. However, there is certain scripts that you can run on your page to add those things automatically to your tables. Again, something to Google. You'll find results how you can automatically add accessibility to your tables. With this, we define the first header row. We only have one header row. And the first thing is like the title of the league. I could have written teams as well. And then we have the wins, losses, percentage, games back, wildcard back, games back, and then the last 10 games, current streak, then runs scored, runs against, the difference of the two, and home and away record of the teams. Okay, I just wanted to say that I really know what it is. I watch baseball now and then. So going from there, we have to specify the data of the table. And again, we'd use a TR for a row and then TD compared to TH. TH is for the header elements. TD is for the data elements. And then we could just put the text in the middle in between the tag that we want to see in the table. Right here, Baltimore Orioles, we have that here, 24 wins, 24. But what I do, and it's not only so I can find again what I enter here, it helps, you know, because sometimes you see that people add like comments here and say like, okay, a team like this. Oh, sorry, we're not in CSS, we are in HTML, so they add something like this, you know, so they know what data to enter in this particular cell. But in this case, I define something that I simply called data label. This could be anything. It could be Holger's label, Holger's identifier. Data label is something I picked, and usually you start these things with data dash. That is something that has gotten quite popular in HTML developer circles, so you'll see this quite a lot. For example, data BS are the data bootstrap tags. So data label, just very general, very common. I want to label something, so I have the team, the wins, the losses, the percentage, and I added all the values. Again, copy paste from the current standings on MLB.com, nothing specific. And then after having all the rows, I end my table, my div, and that's my HTML document. And this is a really ugly looking table, right? Like, and the problem is, if you see here, this is the normal behavior of tables. So if you look at this table on Pixel 7, this is what it looks like. Yes, really. And that's the reason why a lot of people say tables can't be used on responsive or for responsive stuff, but you'll see pretty quickly it's not that bad at all. And tables are important because we want to present tabular data, and we might want to offer editing in those tables, you know, to our users to make it easy. So this is really a good exercise to look at. So first, some really strange things with tables. So I select the table tag. If you don't want to address the table in general, you could also put a class on your table and then basically say table dot something. If you just want to restrict it to certain tables, I'm going to use all the tables here or all the table tags on this thing. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make the table width 100%. That is something that's the thing. If you align something in a container in HTML and you want to make it responsive, that's basically the first thing to do, set its width to 100%. And then this is something rather new. I never learned this in college. Border collapse. What happens there is that the lines or the distances or gaps between the different cells go away. So let us start with the width is 100%. Let me show you the background color. Let's set that to white. Not that we really want to do that, but let's just do what happens. So the caption, that's the first thing we can see. The caption is not part of the table. Yeah, even though it is part of the table tag. So that's the first wow, you know, but no, it's not. And then the background color, white. So it is literally just the table with the header. So there's no difference whatsoever. Which makes sense, you know, because the table encompasses both the header and the cells. So the same we can do, you might think, for TH and TD, and now set the background color to white. And believe it or not, this gives us this ugly result. We get like or if we just take, for example, the ED, you see that here we have these lines and all this stuff in. And now if we go into the table and say border collapse, and set that to collapse, then all these lines and everything go away, and we have way more control how big the distance between the different things is. That's the main reason for doing that kind of stuff. So let's set the table background to the actual color that we want to use. And again, I'm going to use a variable for this. I say table background bg color, and I'm going to define the color 33, 33, 33. Perfect. As we can see, this is a dark gray, so to speak, table bg color. And then I can go here, and in the table I can say background color. And of course, Copilot, thank you. Very smart, table bg color. And I have the background. Of course, I have to take this away from the TD tag. Because it's lower in the CSS file, it overwrites what's being defined before. So with this, we have the background of the table, and we can start doing other things. For example, think of the alignment first. For example, it would be nice if the caption and the TDs and the THs weren't like so close to each other, so we insert padding. And again, we want to make this flexible to the font, right? So we say 0.7 rem, for example. With that, we get already, and now I have to make my view a little bit bigger so we can see that all without it getting smushed. Okay, so with that, we have our wonderful table like this. We can already see that it is a table, but it's still, see, this is what happens. It's still not responsive or anything. We just can read everything nice, but it's kind of hard to read because we don't see really the caption. What is the caption? What is the header? And what are the individual lines? So that is something we will fix first. First of all, I fix the alignment of the header and of the caption because I don't like it that it is centered. So I say text align center. Sorry, I don't want it centered. So text align left. There we go. And everything moves over. I can see it right here. And don't worry about that it's not responsive yet. And it's kind of good that you see how ugly it looks if you don't do what needs to be done to make it responsive, right? So the caption is aligned left, and also all these are aligned left now. And for the caption, I want to define a background. And instead of using a variable for this, I'm going to hardcode this with HSL. And HSL allows us to specify hue, saturation, and lightness. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the first value is 0, 0%. Don't use commas, very important. This is a different semantic, so to speak. And that's it. I could also have written black. Okay, but I didn't. The reason is, you'll see the reason pretty quickly. So this is black, already looking better. And let's do a font size of 1.5 rem. Also make the font weight bold. I'll see. Almost looking good, huh? Like a table again. So text transform. And uppercase, look at this. So now it looks like a caption of a table already. And then we can go from there and start styling the table header here. And that is where the HSL comes in big time. Because this week we can actually add a value to those three, and that gives us the transparency. So what I'll do now is background color. I'm going to say HSL. Yes, 0, 0, 0. So that would be black. So if I save this, this will be black. Oh, beautiful. But what I can do is I can say with an opacity of 0.5. And that means I have black color, but only 50% with 50% opacity, so the background shines through. And the background is this color, so I get this wonderful color to really distinguish it both from the caption and from the table body. We already have a background for the table, but if you look at this right now, it is really, really difficult to read from left to right without losing your line, right? So it would be kind of nice if we had alternating background colors, right? And this is actually something we can do pretty easily with CSS. So we can see tr, each table row, and then nth of type, meaning each nth of any of these table rows, right? And then we say to n, all the even ones. So, and with that, we can then specify a background color. And again, I'm going to use the HSL syntax, percent, 0%, and then just a subtle black color on top. And you see that gives us the alternating rows. Sweet, huh? And it's just beautiful to read. And if you want more emphasis, you can do 2.5, makes it darker, or 1, even less, you know? Just model it how you love it. You can, of course, you can put these 0.5s into variables, these alpha values as they are called formally, and leave it this hard-coded. The variations that you can do are infinite. You know, this is just one example for it. And at this point, we're done styling the table, but it's still not responsive, right? It doesn't look good. And this is what we'll do now. So this is called a mobile first approach. And what I'll do is I define a media query. I'm going to say the max width. And I know that it gets ugly. Where does it get ugly? Like here, around here, right? This is still, so around, I would say 1010. So it's just hard-coded here for at first, 1010 px, okay? And from there, we know that we need to align the rows differently. So what we can do, we can literally say all the data cells, we flip the display to block. And with that, if we make it smaller, boom, there you go. We flip, because the table data cells by default in HTML are in line, right? They stay on the line, and that's not what inline means, but they're not flipping to the next line in the document and taking the full width like block elements. No, they literally stay in line and build a row, right? That's how it's designed. But if we overwrite that, what we're doing here, so what we're saying here is as long as the width is not 1010 pixels, override TD with display block. So right now, when it's shown like this, it's still the default value that any web browser comes with. So as soon as we go lower than 1010, the TD elements are overwritten and display is flipped to block, which leads to this, which is still very ugly because the header element restricts this, you know? So the header element is actually something I don't want to show at all. So I'm going to say th display none. Voila. And now we are almost there, so I can make this smaller again. Look here. Wonderful. Oh. But now we don't have any indication what these values are. We know Baltimore Orioles, 24, 12, what are those? And this is where the attributes that I defined come into play, believe it or not. And this is actually kind of cool. Like these attributes here can be accessed in CSS nowadays. I don't know how new this is. I know when I learned CSS first, that wasn't, yes, I know, I'm old. But I know when I learned CSS, that wasn't available. What we can do, we can use the TD before, and then we can use the content and say attr or attr for attribute, and I want the data label. And if I save it like this, you can see that all the data labels are prefaced before, and the content is literally inserted before the actual information, before the actual TD tag. And that's kind of cool, right? So if you think I'm crazy, let's see what we can do as well. We can also add a colon to this, like so, right? And then we can say, if Copilot plays along, we can say font weight, bold, for example. Wow. And we can also do text transform, capitalize. And voila, we have the appearance that we had. There's no space here. And if you look up the documentation, you find out that you have to do it like this. Don't worry about it. It's the Unicode for space. And this way we have team, wins, losses, and this is a true responsive view of the same table. So if I make this bigger again, as soon as I have the 1010, sorry, I'll make it a little bit more bigger. Here we go, boom, it flips over to the horizontal view again. But this is truly usable on a mobile device. Now you go to the Pixel 7 and you can scroll through your table. Of course, you might have to fix the distance a little bit. So what we can do here is you can do TD, and you can do, for example, right away. You can say where you have display block, you can say padding, you can say 0.5 and 1, sorry, 0.1 rem, 1 rem, save, to make it a little bit easier to read. And then the top and this is a little bit close to each other. So what you can do here is you do TD first child and do padding top 1 rem, and you do TD last child, and you do padding bottom 1 rem, and then you have nice distance. If you want more, do more, you know, nobody, this is your layout, whatever you find better readable. 1.5 is probably the best one right now. So 1.5, 1.5, and there you go. Pretty good to read. So you have your responsiveness defined for the table. Mobile first, of course. So responsive, and there you go. Perfect. But we're still not done, because this is still not really good. This is a good solution. Don't get me wrong. I like it. I really, really like it. I think we can do better though. And I don't want to steal. This is a sentence a famous Apple developer uses on YouTube all the time. But we can do better. So I steal it here for once. I don't want to make a habit out of it. But this can literally look better, because this is all lettering, and this is all like not underneath each other. It doesn't look good. So instead of saying display block, we say display grid. Okay, and with that, we can also get rid of the padding, like so. And we need to define grid template columns, as suggested here. So we can do one fraction, which means like we have 2 columns, and each of them get 1 fraction. So we have 2 total. So what that means is this is 1/2 and this is another half. So these 2 columns get each half. And look what happens. Boom, perfect. So now you have a grid for the lower size, and as soon as you go to the big size again, you have the original table again. So with that, you could be happy already. Yeah, I agree. This is perfect. This is nice, but still you have a lot of space here, right? So you might be like, if I have smaller devices, or if I have longer team names and these kind of things, I might need more flexibility here. Yes, of course, you could do something like 15 characters, and then you do auto, meaning 15 characters for the first one, and then this size is automatic. Perfect. That's it. So there's really nothing really that is to be desired with design, because you can simply flip to a grid and then do whatever you want to do. And if this sticks too close, you can also define a gap. Gap, for example, 1 rem. Then you have some additional spacing between the two columns. You might ask, Holger, why didn't you use a grid right from the start for the whole table? Well, that's not what a table is built for. A table should be built in HTML like a table, but for the smaller devices, for the mobile devices, we can use the stacked layout, and the stacked layout then again can be made attractive using a grid. Like this is really, really readable. You know, this is really nice presentation of the content. And believe it or not, we're already at the end to build the responsive table. That's all it takes to build a responsive table with HTML and CSS. However, you might think, okay, this is all nice. You have it in Visual Studio Code. You have your design, but Holger, now show us how we can use it in TMS Web Core. And guess what? I'm going to do that. I'm going to show you how you can create a table and not just this table that is like a demo table. No, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to use an API, and I'm going to get the current value of the standings. Meaning I request the standings of Major League Baseball, and then I'm going to select the AL East just like here. We're not going to build like a selection or anything like that. And then I'm going to select the AL East, and I'm going to generate this table with TMS Web Core using this style sheet so that the table looks like it looks right here. Obviously, you could also install like a hover or something if you hover over the table that gets highlighted. But let's just focus on the visualization and on the responsiveness of the table. Beautiful. Okay, another thing before I go over to the CSS with TMS Web Core, I also, if you were carefully watching in the beginning, I had the pluses and the minuses in different colors, and that's literally what this does here. So we have the text color up, text color down. So you could, for example, define a class. Let's name it dot positive. And you say the text color of that is the variable text color up, and you define a class negative. That's the text color down. And Copilot is pretty smart, huh? To realize that positive is up and negative is down. I just wonder if you go into the Asian or other markets, if it realizes that it should be the other way around, because like red is, you know, these are flipped. But since, okay, so we have these two numbers, and then I can go here, and I'm just going to do it with the with the New York Yankees. Here, I say class is positive, because obviously that is something that you would generate in TMS Web Core, that the plus 53 is positive. And then here the difference is negative. I save this. Immediately these two things work, and you could be like, hooray, it works, you know, right from the start. If you wonder why I did this with 0.6, let's take the 0.6 away. And this is a problem I always had before knowing about this. Look how focused the 53 and minus 31 are now. It's really, really bright, you know? So what I do is, if I take the opacity down to 60%, it looks just nicer and more in line, and it doesn't burn into your eyes when you look like it. So you might think, oh, well, this works right from scratch. So if we look at the smaller one now, we have to scroll down to see it. The difference, the first part is also colored. Well, it kind of makes sense, right? Because we used this content right here with the attribute and just concatenate it. Well, let's also add text color or color. I always want to say text color, and var, and this is the text color, not up, not down, just the normal text color. And with that, we just have the actual value in the green color, and this TDB4 now is in the right color. So don't forget to add that. With that, both cases work just nice. Okay, so this way you're also able to add different colors and all these kind of things. The these are really flexible. And of course, you can also, I'm always being asked, how can you edit these kind of things? So that is where you make changes to the DOM. And I will definitely create a detailed demo at some point about this, but nobody keeps you from, for example, here we have, for example, the New York Yankees. So you could put, for example, an input in here, type text, and then the value, set that to your New York Yankees right here. Then save. And that's how you have editing in your table. And you could make this modification using the DOM in TMS Web Core. This is how you can have editing inside of your table. And the nice thing is that even works if it's responsive, okay? Obviously, you would have to now add instead more margin here so it doesn't flow over to the right. But see, this is how you can use the web to get these things done instead of just relying on automated components of some sort in this way. This is how you have the most flexibility to change your information. But as I said, I'll do a video on those things later on in my book. You will find these things already, how you can do these things. But this is actually something that I've done with many projects before, that I generate a table, and then if the user wants to add something, if it makes sense, if it is an application that is built primarily for the desktop and not for mobile devices, because I don't like if I have to edit something like this on a mobile device. I don't know how great that works, you know? So this is just for desktop devices, kind of like this thing. So you see that with HTML, you can model a lot of things where you usually were in Delphi using a lot of controls and these things. And I've mentioned this many times before. We don't need to write JavaScript, and we can incorporate these things into our TMS Web Core projects. And instead of using JavaScript, we can now use Object Pascal source code to create these tables dynamically based on the results of a web service. But before we do this, we'll take a break and take care. See you soon.